Keir Starmer, the leader of the Labour Party, has been ordered by the Supreme Court to resign after a jaw-dropping £124,000 corruption scandal was exposed live on national television. What millions of viewers witnessed was not a routine political scandal. It was a historic showdown that ripped the mask off British politics in real time. The revelation shocked the nation, stunned Parliament, and left the Labour Party spiralling into chaos. How could a leader once trusted to restore integrity now stand accused of betraying the very principles he claimed to defend? What really happened inside that courtroom? And how will this scandal reshape the future of British politics? Stay with me, because the truth is darker, bigger, and more explosive than anyone expected. It all began like a whisper, a faint rumble that many dismissed as nothing more than political gossip. A small investigation into financial irregularities linked to Starmer's inner circle was supposed to be a minor matter, easily contained behind closed doors. But what started as whispers soon became thunder. Evidence surfaced: emails, secret bank transfers, hidden accounts, proof that pointed directly to the Labour leader himself. At first, party officials tried to downplay the story, brushing it off as a smear campaign. But then, in an unprecedented twist, the case reached the Supreme Court. This wasn't just politics anymore. This was law, accountability, and the highest judges in the land, stepping in to decide the fate of one of Britain's most powerful men. The moment the courtroom cameras switched on, the scandal exploded into the public eye. Millions of people across the country tuned in as every detail was laid bare. It wasn't filtered through spin doctors or political advisors. It was raw, unedited, undeniable. The nation watched in disbelief as emails revealed backroom promises, as witnesses testified to deals struck in the shadows, and as financial records uncovered money funneled through shell accounts. The sum, £124,000, might sound like just a number, but the weight of what it represented was devastating. It was not simply about cash. It was about influence. It was about betrayal. It was about a leader breaking the trust of the people who put him in power. Inside the Supreme Court, the tension was unbearable. Gasps echoed through the chamber as document after document, testimony after testimony, cut through the Labour leader's denials. Each revelation struck like a hammer blow to his reputation. The man once portrayed as the clean alternative to years of political scandal was now revealed as part of the very corruption he promised to fight. And the cameras caught it all, every flicker of doubt on his face, every uncomfortable silence, every moment when the mountain of evidence became too heavy to dismiss. When the ruling finally came, it was like a thunderclap. The Supreme Court, after reviewing the evidence, declared that Keir Starmer's actions were not only unethical but unlawful. Their judgment was clear. He must resign. No backroom deal, no political escape hatch. No one, no matter how powerful, could be above the law. In that instant, the courtroom erupted, and the nation knew history had just been made. The fallout was immediate. Political allies who once defended him scrambled to distance themselves, their statements filled with hesitation and fear. Some tried to rally behind him, hoping to contain the damage, but most saw the writing on the wall. Westminster was thrown into chaos. Inside the Labour Party, factions erupted, with some calling for new leadership and others bracing for civil war. Meanwhile, opposition parties pounced, seizing the moment to brand Labour as broken, corrupt, and unfit to govern. But outside the halls of power, the anger was even fiercer. Across Britain, ordinary citizens, already weary of endless scandals and political games, saw this as the ultimate betrayal. Protests flared, chants demanding accountability filled the streets, and social media lit up with outrage. The words resign, corruption, and justice trended everywhere, fueling a firestorm that no spin doctor could put out. The public wasn't just watching, they were demanding change. And so, a once untouchable leader stood on the edge of political destruction. His resignation wasn't just a personal downfall, it was a national reckoning. The shockwaves of this scandal were only beginning, and the full consequences had yet to unfold. Because if a man like Keir Starmer could fall, then the question hung heavy over British politics. Who else might be next? The Supreme Court hearings were unlike anything Britain had ever seen. This wasn't some quiet legal proceeding hidden behind closed doors. This was a national spectacle, a trial played out in real time with the entire country watching. Cameras rolled as the prosecution laid out a case so detailed, so damning, that even hardened political commentators admitted they had never seen anything like it. The evidence wasn't vague. It wasn't hearsay. It was sharp, clear, and relentless. One by one, documents were projected onto screens. Bank statements showed suspicious deposits. Emails revealed coded language between Starmer's closest advisors, language that suggested more than just mismanagement. Witnesses, some of them former insiders, told the court of secret meetings in dimly lit rooms, payments disguised as donations, and promises traded like currency. Every word painted a picture of a man not caught off guard by corruption, but orchestrating it. The Labour leader, who promised to clean up politics, was now portrayed as the architect of its decay. The most shocking moment came when a series of encrypted messages were decrypted and displayed to the judges. The messages showed conversations that went far beyond politics, discussions of loyalty bought with cash, of influence handed out like favours, of power maintained through manipulation. Gasps filled the courtroom as the words scrolled across the screen. Millions watching from their living rooms saw the undeniable truth. This wasn't speculation, it was proof. And Keir Starmer sat there, forced to watch as his carefully crafted image collapsed in front of him. His face betrayed the weight of the moment. He shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting from the screens to the floor, avoiding the gaze of both the public and the press. Each revelation chipped away at the man once branded as the moral alternative to political corruption. With every passing hour, the silence from his allies grew louder, and the air in the courtroom thickened with the sense that history was unfolding. The judges, unflinching and deliberate, made it clear that this was more than a scandal. It was a betrayal of public trust. They questioned not only the legality of Starmer's actions, but also the ethical rot that allowed them to happen. Their words cut deep. This was not the behaviour of a leader. This was the behaviour of someone who placed personal ambition above the values of democracy. And when they declared that Starmer must resign, the ruling landed like a hammer, reverberating across the country. News outlets broke into live programming, their headlines flashing across screens in bold letters. Supreme Court orders Starmer to resign. Social media erupted within seconds. Hashtags trended worldwide. Commentators described it as the day British politics changed forever. For the first time in living memory, a sitting opposition leader had been ordered to step down by the highest court in the land. It was unprecedented, shocking, and irreversible. The atmosphere outside the courthouse was electric. Crowds had gathered, some in disbelief, others chanting for justice. Reporters pushed through the chaos, microphones extended, desperate to capture the raw emotions of the moment. Some Labour supporters wept openly, unable to comprehend how their leader had fallen so far. Others shouted angrily, demanding his immediate removal, furious at the betrayal. The divide was clear, and it was growing. Back inside Westminster, the ripple effects tore through the Labour Party like an earthquake. Senior figures huddled behind closed doors, scrambling to decide what to do next. The whispers of resignation letters, emergency meetings, and leadership challenges spread like wildfire. The party that once stood, united behind Starmer, now found itself on the brink of collapse. The scandal wasn't just about him anymore, it was about the future of Labour itself. And yet, amid the chaos, one fact could not be ignored. The cameras had captured everything. Every detail, every revelation, every ruling had been broadcast to millions. There was no hiding, no rewriting of history, no chance to spin the story into something less damaging. The truth was out there, and the nation had seen it with their own eyes. The courtroom spectacle wasn't just the trial of Starmer, it was the trial of trust in British politics. And as the dust settled from the Supreme Court's ruling, the country was left with a haunting question. If the leader of the opposition could be brought down by corruption this brazen, how deep did the rot go? The Supreme Court's ruling did more than bring down Keir Starmer. It detonated a political time bomb inside the Labour Party. Overnight, the party descended into chaos. What was once a tightly controlled operation with Starmer firmly in command was suddenly leaderless and fractured. The order for him to resign created a vacuum at the very heart of Britain's main opposition. And into that vacuum rushed fear, anger, and bitter rivalries. Behind the scenes in Westminster, senior Labour figures scrambled to position themselves for what they saw as the inevitable power struggle. Emergency meetings stretched late into the night. Phones rang endlessly as MPs weighed their options. Should they stay loyal to a disgraced leader in the faint hope of survival? Or should they distance themselves, hoping to salvage their own reputations? The atmosphere was poisonous, trust evaporated. Old alliances cracked under the pressure. In public, Labour's front bench tried to project unity, but the cracks were visible. Some MPs defended Starmer, insisting that the ruling was politically motivated, a conspiracy designed to weaken Labour at a critical time. Others, however, broke ranks, calling openly for his immediate resignation and demanding a new leader who could restore credibility. The split was undeniable, and it was growing sharper with every passing hour. The party's grassroots, the members who knocked on doors and handed out leaflets, felt betrayed. Social media exploded with fury from longtime supporters who had believed Starmer represented honesty and integrity. Many asked the same haunting question: how could this have happened under our noses? Some demanded sweeping reforms inside Labour, stricter rules, tighter oversight, a complete purge of corrupt elements. Others threatened to resign from the party altogether, disgusted by the betrayal. The Conservative Party wasted no time exploiting the chaos. Ministers lined up to deliver scathing statements in Parliament, painting Labour as fundamentally broken and unfit to govern. Headlines screamed with phrases like Labour in freefall and opposition in disarray. Tory strategists pushed for snap elections, sensing that Labour's implosion could hand them a decisive advantage. For the Conservatives, this was political gold, an opportunity to portray themselves as the stable alternative at a time when Labour looked like a house collapsing in on itself. Meanwhile, smaller parties saw their chance to strike. The Liberal Democrats called for sweeping reforms to restore public trust, while the Greens used the scandal to highlight the dangers of corporate influence in politics. Even independent MPs gained momentum, presenting themselves as voices untouched by the corruption that had brought Labour low. The political battlefield was shifting rapidly, and Labour's enemies circled like sharks smelling blood in the water. Inside Labour itself, the leadership question loomed large. With Starmer disgraced, the party faced a brutal choice: attempt to rehabilitate him against impossible odds, or cut him loose and search for someone new. Contenders began to emerge, each presenting competing visions for the party's future. Some promised a return to the party's traditional left-wing roots, while others argued for a more centrist path to repair credibility with the wider electorate. What united them was one truth: they all knew Labour was fighting not just for power, but for survival. The crisis also forced Labour to confront deeper issues. The scandal was not simply about one man, it was about a culture that allowed corruption to fester unchecked. How had £124,000 moved through secret channels without being noticed? Where were the watchdogs? How many people had known but stayed silent? The questions piled up, and with them, the sense that Labour's problems ran far deeper than Starmer himself. Outside the political bubble, the public's anger grew louder. Protests erupted in London, Manchester, Birmingham, and beyond. Crowds chanted for accountability, holding up signs that read "No more lies" and "Clean up politics." Citizens who once trusted Labour to fight for fairness now accused it of being no different from the scandals it condemned. The betrayal felt personal, and the people demanded blood. Labour, once poised to challenge for power, now looked shattered. Its leader disgraced, its members divided, its voters furious. The party faced an existential crisis. Could it rebuild trust in time for the next election? Could it even survive the internal civil war now erupting in its ranks? Or was this the beginning of the end for a party that had once been one of the pillars of British democracy? The only certainty was uncertainty. The chaos inside Labour was no passing storm. It was a full-blown hurricane, tearing through the party's foundations. And in its wake, one truth became undeniable. The £124,000 scandal had not just destroyed Keir Starmer. If the Supreme Court ruling shook Westminster, it was the public reaction that turned the scandal into a national firestorm. Across the United Kingdom, outrage erupted with a force that politicians could not control. Ordinary citizens, already weary from years of broken promises and endless scandals, felt this betrayal cut deeper than most. For many, Keir Starmer had been the politician who promised to restore dignity and honesty to public life. To see him exposed in such a spectacular way left people not only angry, but also disillusioned. The streets told the story. Within hours of the verdict, protests ignited in London, Manchester, Liverpool, and Birmingham. Crowds surged outside Labour headquarters, carrying placards that read, "Resign now and no one above the law." The chants echoed through city centres: "Justice, justice, justice." This was no small group of activists. This was ordinary people, workers, students, pensioners, families, all united by one demand: accountability. The scandal had spilled out of the courtroom and into the very heart of the nation. On social media, the fallout was relentless. Hashtags like Starmer scandal, Dark 124 corruption, and Resign now trended for days. Millions of posts flooded Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok, dissecting every detail of the case. Clips from the live courtroom broadcast went viral, shared with captions like "The moment it all came crashing down," or "History unfolding before our eyes." Supporters who once defended Labour's leader now admitted their faith had been shattered. Others mocked the party, claiming the scandal proved that they're all the same. The media seized on the storm, dedicating endless hours to analysis, speculation, and heated debate. Morning news shows brought in political commentators who described the ruling as a once-in-a-century event. Evening panels featured former MPs and legal experts dissecting every angle of the scandal. Headlines screamed across newspapers: fall of a leader, Labour in ruins, the £124,000 betrayal. The saturation was complete. No one could escape the story. But beyond the noise of social media and the frenzy of news coverage, there was something more dangerous brewing: an erosion of trust. For many citizens, this was not just about Keir Starmer. It was about the entire political establishment. If a man who campaigned on integrity could fall so hard, who could be trusted? Calls for reform grew louder. Protesters demanded stricter rules on political donations, harsher penalties for corruption, and independent watchdogs with real power. Commentators warned that unless drastic reforms were made, public faith in democracy itself could collapse. Inside Parliament, the ripple effects were devastating. The government tried to distance itself from the scandal, but the questions would not stop. How many others knew about these secret payments? Was Starmer the only one involved, or just the one who got caught? These questions hung heavy over Westminster, fueling suspicion and paranoia. Members of Parliament from both sides of the aisle were suddenly under pressure to prove their own hands were clean. Trust was no longer given, it had to be earned. The volatility spilled into everyday conversations. In pubs, workplaces, and family dinner tables, people debated what the scandal meant for Britain's future. Some argued that politics was beyond repair, that no party could be trusted to govern. Others believed this was the wake-up call the nation needed, a chance to demand real change and rebuild a system that had failed too many times before. The scandal wasn't just a political event, it had become a cultural reckoning. And then came the protest outside Westminster itself. Tens of thousands gathered, chanting beneath the towering walls of Parliament. Their demand was simple: accountability. The air crackled with anger as protesters waved banners that read, "Clean up politics" and "Enough is enough." Riot police stood on standby, bracing for clashes. The scenes were broadcast worldwide, with international news outlets describing Britain as a democracy in crisis. Even beyond Britain's borders, the fallout was felt. Allies watched nervously, with foreign governments expressing concern about stability in one of Europe's key powers. The scandal became a global story, raising uncomfortable questions about corruption and accountability in modern democracies. The message was clear: if this could happen in Britain, it could happen anywhere. By now, the scandal was no longer just about Keir Starmer, or even about Labour. It was about the future of British democracy itself. The people had spoken. They would not accept excuses. They would not accept silence. And they would not forgive betrayal. The outrage was real, and it was not going away. And yet, one question remained unanswered. A question that kept the nation on edge. Could Starmer fight back, or was his political career already finished?